So I went in and I blended it a little bit more and I fixed it up. Obviously, because I haven't done any of the shading up here, I have this strange gap between my hairline and my actual forehead. So when we go back in and shadow that, and you know, if I had my hairstyle and everything, it would be a little bit different. But what I think it's probably going to end up having to happen for me, because we can kind of see once I get further away, most of my highlight disappears. So I will probably have to come in with pure white and highlight it, because like this one is going to pop really nicely, but if I get really far away, you're just going to lose those. Because I am just that pale. So I will probably have to use white. I know a lot of things try to tell you to not use white, but sometimes if you are just as pale as I am, you just don't really have a choice. So something I kind of vaguely mentioned in the other video was that if you're really, really oily, using cream makeup can get really tricky. So for me, when I use it just for like my regular highlighting and contouring and foundation, it doesn't give me a problem, but whenever I do age makeup, and I always forget this until I am doing it, my face is so oily, and from all of the like face oils and skincares that I use, it really just kind of blurs everything together. So I strongly urge you that you use like a mattifying primer, which I should have done before this, or you use powders or like water activated paints, or you should skip your face oil like I should have done this morning, because it is really hard for me to get this to not just like completely blend off of my face, because my face is just that moisturized. So kind of watch out for that. So now we're going to talk about eyes. So for eyes, I think it's really easy for it to get really like muddy and blended together and to do too much. So a lot of times people do like to use like pencils for that. So I think I'm going to come in and kind of map it out with a pencil, and then I'll probably have to go in with a cream just to touch it up more. Again, I am really oily everywhere, so hopefully this will go a little bit better for me. One note on pencils though, you want to make sure that you are not using ones that are too like hard and too waxy. So a lot of pencils, especially a lot of the ones that come in the theatrical kits, they are not soft enough to, I really feel like they shouldn't even be on your eyes as eyeliner. I think they are brow pencils, and everywhere else they can get painful, but there's a lot of like creamy pencils out there. So this one is a pretty creamy pencil. Krylon's like face liners are pretty creamy. Generally speaking, if you ever use these like Kajal pencils or just like the like thicker liner, I only have one in a highlight color, but stuff like that can be really good to use. Just be really careful if you're using one that's too hard, so you might want to test it on your hand first and then obviously sanitize it, but just be really careful about that. So with the eyes, we really want to focus on like, because this is the area we normally brighten when we do corrective, so we're really going to try to make this a lot darker. So this whole section gets a lot darker, and then I like to draw in, I do little crow's feet, and then I usually like to give myself like another eye bag, just as I've said in other videos, because it's fun eye bags, which is really not fun, I guess, but I always find it entertaining. So I'm gonna go in with this liner and just kind of like map this out first. So that's why I think it's like important to not like get so hung up on like the exact products and exact process that like one person does, because you can see like this is kind of your like traditional theatrical way to do it, and I mean you can even see, look at my face, like I'm not wearing highlighter, like I am just honestly that oily. So it's really like you have to find the products that work best for you. So for me, I can already tell like my skin is much more accepting of this pencil than it was of the cream makeup. So this is something I'm probably gonna have to go in and kind of alter the color of, but this is pretty much like the color I would use for my eyebrows normally. So it's okay to use things like that, just make sure, you know, sanitize things. This is mine, these are all my own pencils, so it's not too big of a deal for me to go back and sanitize it. So I know I want this to be dark, and one thing I see is that a lot of people extend this, like that's probably even, and again, this is my own face, so touching it not nearly as bad as if this was someone else's. Make sure your hands are sanitized. I have my hand sanitizer sitting right next to me, so make sure you're staying sanitary. If you're touching or doing someone else's makeup, please don't touch their face if you can avoid it. But and so I'm gonna go in and kind of give myself sort of like another kind of puffy eye situation. I feel like I always end up making my eyes look too intense, so I try to follow what I naturally have, what people naturally have. So because of how my cheekbones are, I have these pretty brutal under eye circles and bags all the time, so we're just gonna make that a little bit more intense. My eyes kind of like bulge out a little bit, so I can kind of feel right here, and I can kind of go underneath where they're the thickest, and that's gonna help me get another nice little eye bag. And so my eye over here also kind of like droops down a little bit, so if I want, I can kind of like follow that, and we can work on, this is one area where I really think if you have a liner, I think crow's feet are much easier with that. crow's feet are tricky. I think the more subtle you do them, the better off you are. And if you do too many, you're going to kind of lose the effect. So you don't want to do a ton. And so this is something I can tell I'm like probably going to have to go back in and do a little bit more, but for now we're just going to kind of leave it like that. And sometimes what I will actually do is I'll just like make this shadow worse and not necessarily do like the individual crow's feet on people too. And so if you need those, if you like kind of crinkle your eyes up, you can kind of see where your natural ones might want to be. And again, being closer to your face than what I'm currently doing would make this a lot easier. But just so you can kind of see. And then, so this area, if I try to color all this in with pencil, that's going to be a little bit too much. And eyeliner pencils are sometimes tricky to get off, so I would still recommend going in with like a cream or a powder in there. But as far as like getting some of these like fine details, or if I'm like drawing in like my forehead lines, this pencil might end up being a lot easier. And so one thing that's really important with eye bags is if you're going to do multiple ones, you don't want them to connect. So this one kind of blurs and ends this way, and this one kind of goes this way, but their ends don't meet, and they don't have like a hard stop at like any other part of my face. They just kind of feather out, and I think that's what's like most important when you're trying to get that really important like eye bag effect, is if you don't leave like that space, then you're never going to get the effect that you are really looking for. So now we can kind of come in and do the rest of the shading, which I am going to use these creams for. So this is when I really like to use purple, especially in somebody's under eyes. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of lay this. So this is like a mix of what I was using on my forehead, but with just like slightly more purple. And then I really want to make all of this a lot darker, and then what I usually do for my eyelids is I like to make them kind of like pinky, because I feel like that kind of helps with like aging, or if you ever have to just like look sick, that will help quite a bit. And then usually with age you kind of like droop a little, so you'll see a lot of people will do sort of a like diagonal moment here. That's gonna help kind of like droop and like pull everything in too. And so again, I'm not really bothered by like when I'm doing my under eyes, like if this color is slightly different than my forehead, because usually our under eyes are a completely different color than what the rest of us looks like anyway. And so I'm just kind of really roughly filling this in. Again, being much closer to your face than how I am right now makes this far easier. But kind of come in, and so I can find that same line, which I accidentally connected too far, but that's okay because I can fix it with highlight. And I come in here, and then I can really lightly try to shade over. So again, if I'm not sure, I can kind of crinkle up my eyes. And then these, I feel like the crow's feet, I usually end up almost like blending away when I'm doing everything, but they can make a big impact when your highlights and everything. And that's one thing with like your under eyes, is your highlights are what are really gonna sell it, so it doesn't just look like you're like bruised or something like that. Because kind of like at this point I feel like I just kind of look a little bruised, not quite older. And so a lot of times when I'm working under the eyes, I actually, to blend things out instead of like a sponge, because it can be hard to get in that area, I like to use like a little rounded brush that's meant for like your crease. So when you're blending, generally you're blending shadows, they go up, but they also kind of have to feather out too. And then again, I can go in this one, and you just kind of move it back and forth. And so when you just move it back and forth like this, that also helps like maintain the line without having it be super harsh and destroying the work that you did. And so this area I'll probably have to go back in and do a little bit more with. But you can see, like, compared to my other side, looking a little bit older. And then for these, again, I just kind of pull any sort of a line. I just like to pull them back and forth. I will obviously go in and kind of perfect this more when I am closer to my face, but I think you can kind of see this is really just kind of bringing out like the natural shadows and bags that I have, and this is just going to add in a little bit of a shadow and a little shading. So now that I'm at this point, let's go ahead and add our highlights with our eyes, just so that you can kind of see how much more it will pop. And so again, I want that highlight to go right underneath my shadow, and that's what's really going to make that stand out much more than it did before. Also, I apologize for my very squeaky chair that I am sitting in. That will probably make many appearances in all of my videos. And so I could be using a pencil here, but I picked up my cream makeup, so that's what I'm doing. So you kind of can see I'm a little all over the place. When I do makeup, I have a lot of different products, and I try a lot of different things. And I don't think that for every person, every situation, I think things are definitely, they're going to be different. So I don't think that there is like one exact way that you can do things. And so another good way to help your eyes look a little puffier too is to really make sure that like your highlights are really strong. So yes, I want to highlight under this, but this highlight that goes under here, if I pop it a little bit in between these two, that can help it look even puffier as well. Again, and then we can take a little bit of my highlight towards like the end of my eye, but I usually end up coming in with like eyeshadows and doing a lot of this. And again, it's my own face, so using my hands, not so bad. But you want to be careful if you are ever working on somebody else. And so right there, I went a little bit too far in, so I'm just going to kind of use my highlight and kind of fix that. And so now I'm at a point where my eyes are looking a little bit older, but this is still looking not totally eye baggy, and to me I feel like it looks a little bit too much, kind of like a black eye. So I'm gonna come in and try to just like shade this with a little bit more brown to kind of help get that gradient back that it's missing, because you don't want it to just be like one line, especially in this area. It needs to be like a shadow, so it can have that hard edge, but it needs to blend out into a nice little shadow as well. So that's a little bit better. So at this point I will go in, perfect these, fix these up a little bit, and then we can kind of move on. We'll move on to like some of the shading around the edge of my face and on my cheeks, so that this little spot makes a little bit more sense on my face, and we will continue.